Hey y'all, in an effort to stay more healthy, I recently bought a bike. Now the bike's really fun to ride, but unfortunately you can't ride it at night because, well, it really doesn't have any lights. So I've been thinking about adding lights to it pretty much since I first got it, but I didn't want to just add lights to it. That felt kind of uninspired, so I was kind of waiting for some sort of project idea to bounce into my head so that way I could implement it on the bike. And I thought of one that was really cool. I was thinking, what if I mounted lights to the bike, but they were reactive to the actual motion of the bike? So in this video, I'm just gonna walk through kind of what I did with that project and show you all how it turned out. So here's the rundown of the idea. I'm using a Pro Micro to control the actual LEDs themselves, and I'm using a 3-axis accelerometer to help me calculate the actual acceleration of the bike to determine whether it's moving or not. If the bike is in motion, then the lights glow a really bright white. But if the bike is not moving, the lights glow in a green color instead. Let's take a look at the internals. All right, so really quick, I'm just gonna go through all the components here. So I'm starting with the actual proto board. On the proto board, I have the Pro Micro, the accelerometer, and a micro USB pinout. This micro USB pinout is where we're gonna get our power in from our battery bank here. This is just a 5-volt battery bank. Any 5-volt power supply will work though. And then the power to the entire circuit is controlled on this switch. So, you know, so I can cut it off or I can cut it on. And then the last piece will be this LED strip. So this LED strip, it has a 3-pin female connector on the end of it, and the board has a 3-pin male connector on the end of it to connect up to allow me to attach the strip to the Pro Micro and the power source from the 5-volt power supply. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I also laser cut a finger joining case to hold all of the parts. I used a website called Make Your Case to actually design the case itself. It was really easy. All I had to do was supply it with dimensions, and it gave me the exact files I would need to download and get cut out on the printer. I did modify the files slightly to have some different cutouts for things like the actual power switch and some holes for mounting. Now the core of this project is the code, so let's take a look at that. So I start out by just defining my pins. So LEDs will be controlled on pin 10. And I have a total of 61 LEDs in my strip. This might vary for you. I also default the brightness to as bright as it can be, 255. I go ahead and I define my other pins. So the X, Y, and Z outputs from the accelerometer are going to be on pin A3 through A1 respectively. This is why I use the Pro Micro because it does have 3 analog pins. And then also ground to power. You don't necessarily need these, but it's good to have. Then I have some variables set here, like this now is the start time, and that's going to help us because that's how we'll know when to stop that entry sequence. Go ahead and we set up logging. I'm going to go ahead and wait and I set up my LED strip here. So in the loop, here's what happens first. So this is our startup sequence. So I have it set to 15 seconds. So essentially for the first 15 seconds it's on, it'll just be green and white and do a slow fade. And then the accelerometer input will actually start to be taken into account. This just gives you a little bit of a transition before it starts with the lights. It's kind of like a startup sequence. You can make this whatever you want. And we'll look at this function in just a second. And then the rest of the loop is just this. So I have this Boolean function returns true if the bike is detected to be moving. If it is moving, it turns them all white and has this delay of 3 seconds. This is just so that way it's not constantly flashing between green and white in between readings, which it can do if you don't have this delay otherwise. And then I say if it's not moving, then make everything green, right? And that's all these functions do. All white just makes all the LEDs white. All green just makes all the LEDs green. All right, moving on. So here's our moving function. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but essentially it calculates the acceleration of the bike, and it checks to basically see, is this value any different than the last value? If it is up to that threshold, then return true. But if it isn't based on that threshold, then return false. Yeah. And then the startup function, this is just my startup function. It just does this really cool little palette color fill that I basically took from the example code that they already had for the LED strip library that I'm using, Fast LED. So yeah, that's pretty much all that does. And the rest of the code is pretty self-explanatory. Again, all white makes them all white, and all green makes it all green. After I finished writing the code, I tested the assembly in the case. And after testing in the case, all that was left to do was to mount it to my bike. While I was designing the case, I made sure to design 2 hole cutouts on the bottom so that way the case could actually mount to my water bottle holder on the bike. As for the LED strips, I ran them along my bike and I used black zip ties to secure them to the actual frame. I decided to use zip ties instead of an adhesive just in case I ever want to remove the LEDs from my bike. Once everything was together, I turned it on and wow, the green LEDs really look good with the black and green theme of the bike, and overall I think that the mods look great. Riding it at night is really fun too. I know it's going to be kind of hard to see because the streetlights in this area are very bright, but riding it at night is really cool. It really helps illuminate things, and the color changing ability of the LEDs really adds for a nice detail. If I were to revisit this project in the future, I probably would add LEDs to the actual handlebars themselves, just so that way I could illuminate more of the road in front of me as I was actually riding. So that's it for this project. If you want to try to build this on your own, I'm going to leave links in the description to all the parts I used in my project, and I'm also going to leave a link to the code down below as well, so you can tinker around with that and modify it to suit your needs. Maybe use it as a starting point. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, and make sure to stay tuned for more coding stuff and things. All right, see ya.